This video is on the Chaparral biome by Reagan Sullivan. The Chaparral is characterized by flat plains and rocky hills. They are commonly seen as the settings of wild western films with shrubbery and cacti. This biome is located 30 to 40 degrees above and below the equator in coastal areas including California and northern Baja California, the Mediterranean Basin, southwest and South Australia, Western Cape, South Africa, and central Chile. The climate of this region is characterized as a Mediterranean climate, meaning that it has mild and rainy winters and hot and dry summers. In the wintertime, it can get as low as 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and in the summertime, it can get as hot as 90 degrees. The Chaparral gets between 10 to 20 inches of rain a year, most of which comes during the winter months. This graph compares the Chaparral's average monthly rainfall, the green bar, to the average monthly temperature, the blue dot. You can see that January is a relatively cool month, roughly 51 degrees Fahrenheit, with a lot of rainfall, roughly 4 inches. July, on the other hand, is a relatively warm month, almost 77 degrees Fahrenheit, and it has hardly any precipitation at all. One limiting factor is that the soil is very nutrient poor, as seen in this photo. Plants have adapted to this factor by developing long roots that grow as far into the soil as possible in order to get the most water and nutrients. Additionally, there are droughts and wildfires that can be incredibly detrimental to the Chaparral biome. Plants have adapted to droughts by developing the long roots I've just talked about, and by having a waxy coating on their leaves, which fights against the transpiration process. You can see this pictured on the bottom left. To prevent being destroyed from a wildfire, some plants have seeds that grow inside of a casing that must be burned in order to be opened for the seeds to be released into the environment. Animals have adapted to the Chaparral by varying their diet to include shrubs, living in burrows to protect themselves against predators, and by being nocturnal, meaning that they sleep during the day and are active at night. The western spotted skunk, pictured living in its burrow, is an example of a nocturnal animal that lives in this biome. Here are some examples of the main producers within the Chaparral. On the left is a scrub oak, which has waxy leaves, and on the right is the chamise plant, which has green, long leaves. Both of these adaptations help these plants retain moisture. On the left is the big berry manzanita plant, whose seeds require fire to germinate. And on the right is the silk tassel bush, which is very drought tolerant. Examples of main consumers within the Chaparral biome and predator-prey relationships are the endangered kangaroo rat, which lives in burrows and is prey for the red diamond rattlesnake, which can disguise itself through its camouflage. The rattlesnake, despite its camouflage, would be consumed by a coyote, one of the Chaparral's top predators. They hunt either alone or in pairs, and eat anything from birds to snakes to rodents. Additionally, they would eat jackrabbits, which are not actually rabbits, but hares. They're interesting because they could regulate the blood flow within their ears in order to control their body temperature. Negative human environmental impacts stem from the lack of understanding about the Chaparral biome. Construction companies primarily see only the coveted coastal land the Chaparral consumes and fails to regard it as a home of hundreds of different species of animals and plants. For this reason, human expansion and the creation of pollution that comes with this process pose a huge threat to the Chaparral. People who live nearby do not understand the biome's ability to handle fire. Because of the frequent wildfires, many people think the Chaparral has adapted to being fire resistant. With this misconceived notion, people frequently create fuel breaks, which is when they completely burn one section of land in preparation for a wildfire. This tactic works under the assumption that the wildfire will cross into the burned area and fade out because there will be no vegetation in its path to refuel it. This is a bad tactic for wildfire prevention because it's unpredictable whether or not the wildfire and fuel break will ever come into contact. Additionally, the Chaparral is only able to withstand fires every 15 to 20 years. Therefore, the creation of these fuel breaks interferes with the time allowed for vegetation to regrow. Education about the Chaparral biome and what it can and cannot handle is key to preventing further negative human impacts. Additionally, laws should be created and enforced about pollution and expansion control within the Chaparral regions. The California gnatcatcher, pictured here, is a small, blue-gray endangered songbird that lives in the Chaparral. They've been on the endangered species list since 1993 and there is an estimated number of 2,500 left in the wild. Originally, they were mistaken to be a local variation of the black-tailed gnatcatcher, but when further studied, they were discovered to be their own species. Primarily, they eat insects and are vulnerable to extinction due to their size, just 4.5 inches tall, and their weight, only 0.2 ounces. They build their nests just a few feet off the ground in shrubs, which make them particularly susceptible to human expansion and predators. Cowbird parasitism is a big problem for the California gnatcatcher. Oftentimes, cowbirds will lay their own eggs in the gnatcatcher nests, and the gnatcatchers will end up raising them instead of their own eggs. These birds are considered to be an umbrella species because they require a large amount of habitat and, when they are protected, then large amounts of both land and other species are protected too. Pictured on the right is a California gnatcatcher's habitat. You can see that its environment is highly coveted because it is on the coast. For this reason, developers in 2010 petitioned to remove the species from the endangered species list. They argued the bird was not its own species and therefore could not be endangered. However, they failed to present any DNA evidence, therefore, the species remains protected on the list. Additionally, this species was protected by the Center of Biological Diversity when the plan for the Southwest National Interest Electric Corridor was proposed. This plan would have allowed for the placement of utility and power lines within the gnatcatcher's habitat. The Center of Biological Diversity threatened to sue for the protection of the many endangered species within the Chaparral biome, and they followed through on their threat. Thank you for watching. This is the end of my video. I hope you learned a lot about the Chaparral biome.